When most people think of haunted places, what comes to mind are houses, cemeteries, or even somewhere abandoned. But what about the many waterways? Water is an integral part of life, and throughout time, water has been associated with many different deities or water spirits in many cultures. Paranormal experts have also suggested that because water is a conductor of energy, spirits can use that energy to communicate with the living. It should then come as no surprise that many of the Earth's waterways are just as haunted as traditional locations. Whether it be sea monsters, ghost ships, or wandering spirits, most waterways have something spooky to share. Following the Hudson River from New York City, you will pass through the town of Sleepy Hollow, home of Washington Irving's classic tale of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman. But this is not the creepy place you're looking for, so continue on upstream and you will reach Bear Mountain State Park and the peaceful crystalline water at the base of the mountain called Hessian Lake. Don't let the natural beauty of this lake fool you. The lake truly has a gruesome history. During the Revolutionary War, the British Redcoats and the German Hessians auxiliary soldiers were knee deep in a brutal battle with the American patriots along the river and lake. The patriots held their ground behind a stockade wall while the Hessian soldiers led the charge to capture the fort. The Patriots were able to hold off the Hessians and Redcoats for a while. Eventually, though, they were overwhelmed at great cost to the Hessians. It is said that more than 250 Hessians fell during the battle, and the bodies and various body parts were thrown into the lake, which turned the water red with blood. Timothy Dwight, who became president of Yale College, described the horrors of the lake after visiting the battlefield. We found, at a small distance from Fort Montgomery, a pond of moderate size in which we saw the bodies of several men who had been killed in the assault upon the fort. They were thrown into this pond the preceding autumn by the British when probably the water was sufficiently deep enough to cover them. Some were covered at this time, but at a depth so small as to leave them distinctly visible. Others had an arm, a leg, a part of the body above their surface. Their faces were bloated and monstrous, and their postures were unclothed and disordered. This prompted the lake to be known as Bloody Lake for many years. The name was later changed to Hessian Lake, but the spookiness never left. According to reports, many people claim that after dark, Hessian spirits can be seen roaming the lake shoreline, some with missing limbs and glowing eyes. Monocacy River in Maryland has many ghost stories attached to it. Perhaps it's because of the long dark history as an escaped slave route, or the large number of soldiers who died during the Civil War and battles around the river. Regardless, people still report today of various paranormal activities in and around this body of water. One of the more famous haunted locations along the river is Ligor Bridge. Spanning the Monocacy River along a quiet back road in Frederick County, Maryland, the bridge was constructed around 1900 by local business owner James W. Ligor. Like many construction projects, there were some issues during its construction, but the real trouble began after its completion. In April of 1930, George R. Ligor, son of James, jumped to his death from the bridge his father had built. Since then, numerous tragedies have occurred here. There is rumored to have been several suicides as well as drownings throughout the years. Most recently, in 2018, a bicyclist lost control of his bike and fell to his death in the river below. According to local legends, there was also a group of escaped inmates hiding in the nearby woods. When they heard the dogs chasing them, they attempted to cross the bridge while still chained together. As the dogs drew closer, the inmates, unsure about how high up the bridge really was in the dark, jumped over the side to their deaths. Today, people still report various unexplainable happenings on and around the bridge and river. Reports include shadow figures, disembodied voices asking for help, and the sounds of chains rattling, cars that mysteriously die on the bridge and won't restart. Big Moose Lake in the Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York is a beautiful destination that attracts people from all over the country for recreational enjoyment. But those activities are not limited to traditional elements. Big Moose Lake has been the subject of TV shows, books, operas, and songs, but not for the beauty found here. The lake was made famous for the most shocking, scandalous murder to ever take place at the time in upstate New York in July 1906. Grace Brown grew up on a farm in Chenango County, New York, and when she left her family's farm, she went to work at the Gillette skirt factory where she met Chester Gillette, the wayward nephew of the owner. The two began dating in secret because of his embarrassment of dating a girl he considered to be beneath him. In May 1906, Grace told Chester she was pregnant with his child and asked him to marry her. He refused, saying he needed more time, so she moved back home with her family. Chester and Grace continued to correspond with letters, and she continued her crusade to convince Chester to marry her so she wouldn't shame her family. Finally, it seemed Chester gave in and wrote to her saying he was taking her on a romantic getaway to the Adirondacks in July. Grace assumed he was going to either propose or they would actually get married while away. While at Big Moose Lake on July 11th, the couple rented a canoe and spent the afternoon on the lake. For unknown reasons, Grace had left all her belongings at the train station, but Chester brought everything of his, including his suitcase and tennis racket, onto the boat with them. Sometime in the early evening, Chester hit Grace in the head with his tennis racket, and she fell into the water and drowned. He fled the scene, staying at a nearby hotel under an alias. Grace's body soon surfaced, and an autopsy revealed bruises on her head and that she was 4 months pregnant at the time of her death. Within a day, Chester was arrested for the murder. At the trial, he continued to claim innocence, referring to the letters from Grace saying she wanted to die. On December 5th, 1906, Chester Gillette was found guilty of murder in the first degree and sentenced to death in the electric chair. On March 30th, 1908, Chester was executed. Just before his death, it is said that he finally confessed to Grace's murder to his prison spiritual advisor, but exact details were never revealed. Since the tragic murder of Grace Brown, it has been reported that her ghost can be seen both in and around the lake. Her figure is sometimes seen drowning in the water or wandering the lake shore. The area known as Sleepy Hollow along the Monocacy River was first inhabited by the Native Americans who would spend their summers along the river harvesting oysters before moving inland during the winter to the sheltered valleys away from the wind. The first settlers moved into the area in the 1600s, but the area remained mostly vacant until the late 17th century. Frederick Felice established a grist mill at the mouth of the Monocacy River where riverboats could come into the harbor and transport animal pelts, grain, and other products to New Amsterdam, now New York City. According to legends passed down from early settlers, if you're on the hilltop on a misty evening, you may catch a glimpse of the Flying Dutchman, the legendary ghost ship that was doomed to sail the oceans forever, never able to make port. Another specter on the water is that of a Dutch party grower, Van Dam, hopelessly rowing his boat looking for shore. Legends say that against the advice of his friends, he headed home from a party drunk at midnight on the Sabbath and was never seen again. There is also the legend of Spook Rock that says strange lights can be seen that are produced by the spirit of a Native American woman who comes in search of her lost husband and baby. The men who built the Croton Aqueduct also claimed that they were terrorized by ghosts they said haunt the Monocacy River near their camp. We can't forget some of the more famous legends of Sleepy Hollow. They come from Arthur Washington Irving. How about the one that claims that if you walk along the river, you may become overcome by unexplainable drowsiness that is a result of a spell cast by a Native American wizard to subdue the enemy tribe? It also explains why the valley is called Sleepy Hollow. And then the most famous legend of Ichabod Crane, who disappeared on his way home from a party late at night after encountering the headless horseman on the dark wooded trail. Even with all the legends and rumors of spirits and old magic, fishermen know the Monocacy River as a great place to catch brown and black trout. From the source in Minnesota all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, the Mississippi River is flooded with larger than life stories, legends, and of course, ghostly tales. Perhaps one area along the river that is considered the most haunted is from Grand River Tower in Illinois to just past Cape Girardeau in Missouri. According to legends, there is not one, but three spooky tales from this area. In October of 1869, the steamship Stonewall was traveling along the river and somehow caught fire. This tragedy became known as one of the worst disasters on the Mississippi. It is believed that the death toll was between 200 and 300 people, but unfortunately that cannot be verified because the passenger list burnt with the steamboat. Witnesses to the disaster reported watching the Stonewall burn for about 2 hours before it finally sank into the muddy river. In October, 17 years later, another steamboat, the Monocacy's boiler exploded, setting the ship ablaze in the same area. Witnesses to this tragedy said that the fire raged. The ship's smokestack fell over on the gangplank, trapping all the passengers trying to escape. The final death toll for this disaster was 35 lives. Some people have claimed to see the spirits from the disasters making their lonely pilgrimages back to the water from the local cemeteries. Others claim to have seen unearthly hands and fingers reaching out of the dark waters. Barge captains and crews have reported seeing unexplainable lights bouncing across the water and hearing the ghostly screams for help as they pass through this spooky stretch of river. Nearby is Tower Rock, a 60-foot rock formation that has sat along the river throughout history. Boatmen would celebrate with a drink of good cheer when they passed, and river pirates used it as an ambush spot. Meriwether Lewis, for the Lewis and Clark expedition, even wrote about its peril. Perhaps the creepiest story to come from the rock happened around 1839, when an entire wedding party's boat got caught in a whirlpool and pulled under. Only one person survived. That same day of the accident, a baby girl was born, niece to the groom. She was given the same name as the bride. To celebrate her 20th birthday, she held a party on Tower Rock. According to legends, the ghostly wedding party arose from the Mississippi and presented her with a mysterious parchment roll, forewarning her of the coming Civil War. After delivering the message, the ghostly party disappeared back into the muddy waters. Sometime around 1823, Joseph Smith Higby bought the farmland and existing small hotel called the Hermitage in New Jersey. Higby and his younger brother added to the existing hotel and continued its operation as a lodging place for Delaware Bay pilots for many years. Higby died in 1879 and, at his request, was buried in a marble tomb by his hotel. Later, in 1937, when his heir died, she requested that her uncle's final resting place be moved next to her at the Cold Springs Presbyterian Cemetery on Cape May. Ever since then, there have been reports of a ghostly man wandering Higby Beach, sometimes walking a large black dog, and disappears if approached. It seems Mr. Higby's spirit never left, and who could blame him? Lake Ronkonkoma is Long Island's largest, deepest lake that is surrounded by white sands and scenic woods. Thousands of people come to the lake every year to enjoy the water and unspoiled natural surroundings, but many locals won't even come here, let alone dip their toes in the water. According to legends, buried deep in the lake's waters are many lost bodies, victims of centuries-old ghosts who drags young men to their graves. Legend says that in the 1600s, a young native princess fell in love with a woodcutter she spotted across the water. The princess caught the eye of the woodcutter, who also fell in love with her, but their love was forbidden because her father would never let her see an English settler. Every day over the next 7 years, the native princess would write love letters on pieces of bark and float them across the water to her beloved, but she never got a response from him. The distraught princess finally rowed out to the middle of the lake and stabbed herself in the heart. Ever since, the Lady of the Lake had made it her mission to grab young men from her watery graves to replace her lost love. According to some statistics, between the mid-1800s through the 1990s, there have been about 200 drownings in the lake, and only 3 of those were women. Apostle Islands are a large group of 22 islands on the beautiful Lake Superior in northern Wisconsin. Because of its long, rich history dating back to the 1st century BC, there are many stories and legends within the islands. But today we will cover 2 of the many reported hauntings. In the late 1800s, Mrs. McRae was living on Basswood Island, and one Christmas Eve she took a trek to Bayfield Island alone. After she had been gone too long, her husband set out to find her. Unfortunately, by the time he found her, she had died in his arms. It is rumored that her spirit can still be seen making that cold trek across the island. Sand Island is only one of 2 islands with the largest populations, and has been the topic of many magazine articles because of its haunting. According to stories, one day when doing a run, a tugboat burst into flames, causing the two men on board to try different techniques to get to safety. Unfortunately, both men drowned. Today, there are still remnants of the burnt tugboat, which people of the island have turned into a shelter of sorts. Since then, there are records of people claiming to experience the spirits of the tugboat. There are also reports of many other spirits on Sand Island. It is said that today, when you are on the island on a clear day or within the whips of the harsh Superior Lake winds, you can still hear the children's voices, their laughter, and the sounds of them playing. The story of Gardner Lake in Connecticut is a kind of whimsical tale that even the biggest scaredy cat can conquer. So, what would you do if you lived in the late 1800s and loved the house you lived in along the beautiful lake, but wanted to live on the opposite side of the water? Well, you just move your house. That's exactly what one local family did in 1895. They waited until the lake was frozen and put the house on slabs to slide over the frozen water to the other side. The move was supposed to take 2 days. The first day went well with no problems, but the second day, when the family returned to complete the move, their house had broken through the ice and sunk with all of their belongings in it. They were able to rescue some of their smaller possessions, but larger ones, like their piano, remained underwater. This has been confirmed by scuba divers in recent years. Today, many visitors to the lake have reported hearing piano sounds coming from beneath the water of Gardner Lake.